from the money-grabbing security guarded $15 admission fee clutches of the psychiatric institutional Columbia colleges. Free the minds from the suits, straitjackets of the system, of the man, the monolith, the monster, the hyperlock, hypocritical, co-opting, posing, and posturing phonies.
Make sure I got the story right. So you're living in Detroit, you're interested in literature, you're reading all this great old stuff, whether it's Tolstoy, Hemingway, Zola, whatever, all these great literatures, literary writers, and you're like, what about today? I'm going to read today, and you read like, I don't know, mainstream stuff. I don't know, the Paris Review, New York Times Book Review, whatever, and they say, this guy's great, Bret Easton Ellis, whoever, and you go read it, and you think it sucks. And you're like, what's going on here? And that leads to the zine. Is that kind of what was going on in the early 90s?
Yeah, New Philistine. I was living in the Cass Corridor in Detroit, which back then was kind of like the Wild West, and drinking more than I should have, bartending off and on, and I think I stopped at a university library, because the Cass Corridor in Detroit is south of Wayne State University. And so I stopped and was looking at literary journals. And it's like today. I mean, a lot of it is just too literary. It doesn't really connect.
Right.
It's pretentious. It's overwritten. It's all about the sentence, the well-crafted sentence. So anyways, I got a old used Remington typewriter, manual, at a resale shop. I mean, I was really broke at the time, and got some paper and just started typing and cranking out a zine, and it actually got a lot of attention, maybe because I didn't hold back. Not only among the zine scene, you know, I got reviews in Fact Sheet 5 and all of that, like we all did, and other zines. But I sent a couple promo copies to New York. One to a guy at a trendy hip journal called Open City, Tom Beller, and he liked it and told his friends and became subscribers. And I actually had some nice income coming in for a while, which I needed at the time. And but I had some big names subscribing, believe it or not. And one of them was George Plimpton.
Wow.
Plimpton actually, and we ended up meeting him, of course, when we debated the Paris Review and Open City, which was Tom Beller's journal. But Plimpton actually is a really cool guy. Unlike most of his type, he's always tested himself. You know, he famously was a walk-on with the Lions, you know, Paper Lion. He tried boxing, you know, got beat to a pulp or whatever. But he's the kind of waspy type rich guy, and he comes from real money and power. But he always wanted to test himself, so he just got a kick out of like some guy in Detroit putting down everybody. And that's what kind of led to the ULA, because whether it's a gag or not, Plimpton invited me to send him an ad, and he put a little, like a quarter-page or 8-page ad in Paris Review for New Philistine. And Steve Kostecki, way off in Asia, teaching English, and he would bounce around from Japan to Thailand to wherever. I mean, Kostecki, really a character. And but he was subscribing to Paris Review, so I sent in for a copy of my zine, liked it. We started the correspondence by snail mail, and whether he or I came up with the idea of really forming a group to take on the establishment. Oh yeah, March 27th, they yanked Bret Easton Ellis out of psychotic seclusion and brought him to Philly for an evening to do a book signing. I arrived late at the Center City Borders. The small upstairs space was packed, 50 people, the presentation about to begin. Ellis looked and spoke like what he is, a polite yuppie, well-educated and well-mannered, American psycho. Ellis's violence has never sounded real, but an imitation of its source, television. Ellis stood at a podium wearing a loose pullover sweater, kind of like what I've got, I guess. Much of the audience wore suits. I stood at the back. Ellis was nervous. He told the audience he was going to read for 20 minutes. Translation, I'm going to bore you for 20 minutes. In a resonant voice, the description of the minutiae of upper-class life began. I was headed back down the stairs. A soporific drone followed me, echoing from a speaker through the store, putting customers into a trance, until I pushed through a glass exit and stood outside in the welcoming rain. When you see the established literary world up close, you realize what a huge gap it is from them and all the other writers in the country, not just zinesters, but zinesters are kind of grassroots, like you. A lot of us had that punk ethos. Jackman, I guess, had used to promote punk shows, rock shows, and I'd done some promotion, but with other things, but zines are so grassroots, do it yourself, which is why I hate AI so much, because it turns the writer into a vegetable, a tomato.
Right.
Where the computer just does everything for you, and you just push a button or give a prompt or two. Whereas when you're doing a zine, I was, doing the layout, typing it, the art, the covers, I think you really expand your talents that way by being more creative about everything.
Yeah.
Our own editing, proofreading, whatever. Whereas most established writers, they just send it to the New Yorker. One of my mentors or subscribers, so to speak, was a pretty famous writer. I don't want to name drop, but she actually got me to do a review for Book Forum in the year 2000 before the ULA started. So anyways, once I moved to Philly, I met her in New York for lunch, and she's been in the New Yorker multiple times, and I was complaining to her about how the Book Forum editor just ripped my review to shreds, even to change the slant of it. It's amazing what they do, Fred. And so I told her I felt like I got fucked in the ass. She said, "Oh, you'll get used to it." But when I met her in New York, she was telling me about the New Yorker. Now, she's a terrific writer. She was one of the best short story writers in America. Her initials are MG, if anybody's curious. And she was really big in the 80s and 90s. Really great short stories, maybe a little overwritten, and I was a fan of hers. But she told me how these editors at the New Yorker, even someone like her, they'll rip their stories apart and, impose their own New Yorker style on the piece. And to me, that's amazing, So anyways, eventually, we got others involved, Ann, Joe Smith, Doug Bassett. I actually met Ann in Chicago. When you live in Detroit, you go to Chicago a lot because that's the big city. Mm-hmm. I thought it was until I went to New York for the first time. And then next time I went to Chicago, I realized, well, Chicago's really not that big,
right.
And compared to New York. New York's just jammed with people. You stand on a corner and there's tens of thousands of people just walking past you. It's mind-boggling, And of course, I was used to downtown Detroit, which is a ghost town, basically,
Wow.
And so anyways, I met Ann, for a few drinks in Chicago. I realized she was a real character.
Ann Sturzinger, yep.
And drank too much like all of us, of course, and so recruited her. And then, we all got together eventually in Hoboken, New York, and had the founding meeting, 6 of us. Mm-hmm. And then we planned the events. We had a petition actually going the Howell protest, or not the Howell protest, I'm losing track. It was a protest against Rick Moody's Guggenheim grant.
Right.
Comes from a super wealthy family, was living on a private island, and he gets a nonprofit grant that should be going to like writers that actually need it, like you or me.
Right.
I mean, come on. So we made noise about that, and then we planned out our events. Debate with Plimpton. We crashed a reading at KGB's where an editor, you want to get buzz, you crash a reading where the editor of Vanity Fair is reading. Back then, Vanity Fair was the center of everything. And a young woman reading, I think, was their culture editor or something. So we all got kicked out, of course, but, created buzz. And then we had the Amato.
Yes.
You were at the Amato,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you and Crazy Karl.
Right.
Yeah.
First time we met you guys in person. Yep.
Yeah. And it's funny how tough it is, I guess, when you're new or something. We had a decent turnout for the Amato, but we had just had a huge full-page article in the Village Voice a couple days before.
Yeah. Start making
and all this
sense.
Other buzz. So we thought, there was, I recognized a pretty high-placed editor at the New Yorker that was there, I think with his girlfriend, probably just needed a place to go to meet her or whatever. And, but it was a lot of fun. And then, we got a lot of attention after that, as
right.
you know.
Right.
I think the culmination was that Howell event. And I looked at Frank Walsh's interview with Pat Reed, and I noticed
Pat King, yep.
Pat was interspersing scenes from the Howell thing. And unfortunately, he shows us, I think, in one of the videos I saw before, he shows us all drinking beforehand, where we had pictures of margaritas. And I know I was pretty blasted, before the thing ever event started. We did our little demonstration outside, has all these rich people, oh yeah, they're bohemian like how they're celebrating Allen Ginsberg, but
right.
Kerouac and those guys were starting out, these people wouldn't have given them the time of day.
Right.
And they looking with scorn at us, and then the event started, and someone, I don't know if, Doug Bassett somehow had ordered 2 front row seats, front and center, to this reading.
Wow.
That was so lovely. Now, I'm looking for a volunteer from the ULA named Karl Wenclas, King Karl, to remove... Please, Karl, would you remove this nose from my face before you say your next bit?
Should I really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Do you see how it was put on my face? It's called the clown nose of death. You'll see more of that later on. Karl Wenclas.
At least Ray Carver would cry when Gordon Lish would decimate his work. These people are signing up for that. Crazy.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. You can see both points of view in a way, because Gordon Lish kind of knew that the whole literary work wasn't really connecting with the average person. He was trying a lot of different things. But on the other hand, he's got a really good writer, Ray Carver, who he humiliates, basically, by totally rewriting, but that's what they do.
Yeah.
And these editors, just get so filled with power and whatever. But he thought of himself as a George Martin type, or who are some other guys, like the Motown guy, Berry Gordy Jr.,
Right.
who just found all these singers with talent, but he totally transformed them, produced their records, cleaned them up, put them even to, what do they call it, school where you learn how to walk with a book on your head and all of that.
Right.
I mean, this guy was hardcore, and he had been an auto worker, Berry Gordy.
Right.
I mean, what he did was really admirable. He came from really nothing, working on the line in an auto plant, which I did when I was like 19, and not fun at all. And then, created this billion-dollar record company. But so you can see, you've got to really know what you're doing, though, to be that kind of like a dictator. You exit a freight elevator and step into a loft in an artsy warehouse somewhere on the Upper West Side, New York. You're surrounded by rich kids. Half the people speak French. A stern-faced careerist woman dressed casually but with the persona of Hitler asks for your $5. She's the Eco Baby's publicist. You give her your money. She frowns. Inside, the conversation resembles the level of an adult prep school. No one is poor, no one working class. Well, I told Reg that he really must come to Zurich next week. Raj? No, Reg. Really? In the corner, surrounded by fawning admirers, stands the literary star of the month, tall and coldly attractive, inaptly named Galaxy Craze. You're impressed and move closer to stand in her light. Then you realize she's just one more bland writing school factory wasp, one more snore-inducing attractive bore, one more pampered debutante pretending to know how to write, basking in the glow of the role like the female robot in Metropolis. She pouts about agents and contracts while the sycophants drool. She demands their attention. She tells them she's the best. Aren't I, she wonders? Last year, Bliss Broyard stood in that corner. In years past, so many more. In 10 years, Galaxy will be married to her investment counselor and writing novels in the tamed manner of Susan Minot. You move on. At a long table, the pack of piggish rich kids devouring the planet before the inevitable crash greedily grab drinks like snorting hogs in a pen. You elbow your way in to try for your share, but it's futile. They got there before you. It's their game, and they make the rules. Walsh is, he's just a born performer.
Yes. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Let me tell you how I met Walsh. Because he's always been, out there is an understatement, But I mean, just great guy. Anyways, in 2000, when we were setting up, basically the foundation for the ULA, and Doug Bassett moved to Philly. He was living in a small town in western Pennsylvania. If you know western Pennsylvania, there is nothing going on there. If you get outside Pittsburgh, forget it. I would drive, back and forth between Philly and Detroit. So, I think, there's nothing here, It's like driving out west, of course, is more so. Anyways, Bassett moved to Philly, and so, we met up, and I'm showing him the town, and we stopped at some of the cool bars, and we're at one of them, and there are these two characters at the bar, and me and Doug Bassett are sitting at the bar, and one of them asked, well, what do you guys do? And I said, well, we're writers, And the one guy wearing glasses and a beret or something starts like picking a fight with us. We get in a big argument and debate or whatever. He was there with his good friend, whose name escapes me. So, and they leave or we left. I said, man, you never know what characters you'll run into in Philly. So anyways, I'm working a calling room like a year or so later, and Mad Dog Grover, Michael Grover,
Yeah.
really, I don't know if he's still at it, but at the time, one of the best spoken word performers in the country.
Yeah, I saw him a couple years ago. He's still performing. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, he knows how to do it. Of course, he practices, unlike most of us, in front of the mirror even. So if you watch him read the same thing a couple times over, you realize he'll smile at the same point, pause at the same point. I think, how many times does he practice this? I said, Michael, do you practice this stuff? He goes, oh yeah, in front of a mirror. You know?
Yeah.
That's hardcore. I mean, he had been part of the Los Angeles spoken word scene with Saul Williams and all these big names. I mean, that's literary readings basically suck.
Yeah.
You realize that, when I got to the East Coast, I remember I went up to the famous New Eurekan Cafe and the Bowery Poetry Club, both in New York, and I watched, these hip hop people in that, and you realize they were on a whole other level. And so, having Grover, we got Grover and Walsh and others, and you're good. And, I think underground or zine writers are way better than the big name poets who you see read, and
It's
I
like
can't
church.
think of any names, but the ones that are on the cover of, Poetry Magazine or whatever, and getting Pulitzer Prizes, and you see them read, and it's just, they stare down and they read in a monotone. Is McSweeney's a zine? It's the antithesis of a zine.
Yeah.
Where you've got to perform. So I'd say it's the antithesis of a zine. In cost, motivation, focus, and intended market, it stands for everything underground publishers abhor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to put theater into it.
And that's when the Firecracker Award was about them giving McSweeney's a Best Zine Award. That's what the ULA and other zinesters found so mind-boggling. Here's some things printed in Iceland for $20.
Yeah, it was so processed with a paid editorial staff,
Yeah.
Totally processed, printed in Iceland and huge money project. But anyways, let me get back to my thread. Oh, anyways, I meet Grover in the calling room, and we were working for an environmental group, fundraising, in a calling room with like 25 people, and you have to be on when you're calling people, asking them for money, and there's a lot of back and forth, and Grover said, oh, you and your ULA or whatever, and I guess while I was there, we had gotten a big write-up in one of the alternative papers in Philadelphia, and he was mocking that. He said he's a poet. Oh, get out of here. Poets suck, So he invites me to go to a reading that him and Natalie Felix were staging. So I'm sitting there, drinking a beer. This was after our shift, which ended at 9 o'clock in the evening. And yeah, the poets are okay, but nothing spectacular. And sure, Natalie Felix looks good, And then Grover comes on, and he just kicked ass. He knew how to project. I mean, a pro. And I go, God, wow, this guy is really good. So I start working on bringing him into the ULA. And so I go to another event, a poetry reading that I think he was reading at, and as we're waiting for him or whatever, there's this other character who appeared drunk, quoting from memory Yeats, The Widening Gyre, but it's a place that the promoters of the poetry reading, it was like a little theater thing, and there was like stage scenery for what normally went on there. And this guy's knocking over the scenery, running back and forth, a real character. And we'd already been planning to do an event in Chicago.
Right.
And so I needed someone to play the masked professor.
The Colin Carter benefit, 2003. Yeah.
Yeah, so recruited Walsh for that, and the rest is history. Well, I still think we're the most radical literary group, writers group ever in America. You know, I'm not going to talk about like samizdat writers in totalitarian countries or whatever, but I think we went beyond the beats intentionally. Jelly Boy was actually great. You know, at that Hall thing, me and him actually went, and I said, who's going with me to grab those two front seats? And there was a great write-up somewhere, Poetry Foundation website or publication or something about that whole event.
He snaps a mousetrap on stage. They invite him on stage, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was a pro. But yeah, now he had some kind of accident where he was burned doing his fire-eating thing. I mean, we just got hit with a lot of bad luck. We had actually gotten our zine, Slush Pile, and some other zines into Tower Records. And we had established a great relationship with the magazine buyer there. And but then Tower Records started having all these problems. I don't know if this guy was let go, and Tower Records, unfortunately, closed.
Yeah.
That could have been the foundation, you know, of actual getting our publications out there and having better publications. Potter was great, but he was a little late in coming up with the books. You know, you have to have everything timing, the books when you're getting the buzz and the publicity. Because I remember we had Slush Pile at Tower Records. At the same time, I think we got a write-up in the Believer magazine. And Slush Pile it sold out instantly. You know, all the copies we could send the guy, you know, they moved at all the stores he put them in. And that was a sign of what could have been.
Right.
But the world changed. I mean, you know, Tower Records, all these record stores were so great. I'm going to sound like an old guy, you know, which I guess I am, but, you know, people don't realize the culture. There's a great book called Culture Crash by a guy named Scott Timberg that outlines how everything changed and culture, you know, artists were marginalized. Of course, Timberg ended up killing himself a couple of years after writing the book, unfortunately. And but he lays it out, you know, how everything changed with the internet and downloads, and the music business changed. You've got one person that makes $1 billion, Taylor Swift, and all the other musicians, 99.9% of everybody else is working a second job. And
right.
It's the same with writers. And so. Yes, it's arrived, each copy in its own individual boutique box. There they stand on the shelves, clunky, crowding out space, overpriced, trendy, hip, upscale, chic, shy, Trey, New York, the most pretentious piece of elitist literary shit ever produced. McSweeney's. Only self-important assholes could write this sort of thing, and only self-important assholes must read it.
You carried on, if you're interested in literature, you can tell us a little bit about New Pop Lit and some of your other projects that in some ways carry the spirit of the ULA.
Yeah, well, this woman in Chicago, she lived outside Chicago, started a website, newpoplit.com, and asked if I would come on board as co-editor. I said, sure. And she ended up dropping out after a year, and so I just took it over. I'd been dating Kathleen Marie Crane, and you know, I had been working with her. We both worked at the Opera House in Detroit, and so we ran a story of hers. And well, you know, I started dating her. We ended up getting married, so I just brought her in as co-editor, and she helps out reading submissions, which is maybe the most time-consuming part. And she's got really good judgment as to what she would go with, what we should not go with. And so we're keeping it going. I'm trying to kick things to another level. And so we've had a petition going against AI. We've got over 1,000 signatures, which isn't bad. And I might be doing an essay on the matter for someone, still to be determined.
Sure.
But trying to put together a plan like the ULA had, which we had everything lined up. Me, Kostecki, Bassett, Jackman we expected Jackman to be kind of like a front person, like Ann, while we would run things behind the scenes, but he kind of backed off from it. She's, very unpredictable. That's all I'm going to say about that. And
yeah, she left pretty early on. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, by default, more or less, I ended up being the front guy because I would show when you get a media interview request, and you've got to be there on time.
Right.
You've got to be there, or you'll never get another one. And but we had everything lined up with 3 events plus the protest, 3 events in a 6-week span. Everything promoted to the hilt. And we created buzz. People were talking about us. Page 6, New York Post, top gossip site, still maybe on the planet. Once they started covering us, and so anybody wanting to make it with a literary project, you have to have a strategy like that.
Right.
I mean, just grinding away isn't going to cut it. The bigs have all the power, the big 5. To get published with them, you've got to suck up to everybody or be connected or someone's daughter or son
right.
or nephew. And otherwise, you've got to make noise.
Right.
And so that's what me and Kathleen talk about, and having the energy to do it, problematic. The money, problematic.
Sure.
The time, me and Kath's, still working day jobs, and she's got a really stressful job, and but you got to plug on.